Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Walking Ministries Online's podcast. Okay, this is episode 3, and we will be continuing from chapter 21 to chapter 30. Now, remember, I must say this again, this is just an overview. I cannot cover everything in its entirety with these 10 chapters. Now, the first part is about the birth of Isaac, the promised seed through Abraham, which would lead to Jesus. Now, as time passed, Abraham implored his servant, which today is a butler, and he had full authority of Abraham's entire resources. So, with today's analogy and understanding of what a butler is, that is what this servant was to Abraham. So some people misunderstand the scripture and think that every time they say servant, it means some forced into slavery kind of situation, which is clearly not accurate. So now, Abraham's servant was concerned in finding the wife for Isaac. So he prayed to God and asked God to guide him. And remember, these people were of holy stature because of their standing with God. So the scripture clearly states that we can be holy, and society's misunderstanding of this is based on a cultural understanding and not from the biblical truth of God. Holiness is explained by God. What we think of holy is totally different from what God thinks is holy. Now I'll give this quick example of what Jesus gave when he said 2 men went down to pray. One was stating how much he is given to the poor and how much he tithe and pretty much how he was living his life. So he was tooting his own horn. Did he do these things that we are supposed to do? Yes, he did. But the pride that was attached to it is a big no-no when it comes to God. So, with this being said now, the other guy didn't even look up when he was praying to God. He was talking about how much of a sinner he was and was just pleading with God to have mercy on him. So, those are the 2 states of either or. There's only 2 states we can ever be in. There's no middle ground. Okay, so the angel of God actually led Abraham's servant to find Rebecca. Now, Rebecca was a young woman. Now, God clearly explains how human development works, is that a female becomes a woman at her first shedding. Okay, so because this was the young woman that God led the servant to, he still in his heart was questioned to make sure, is this the right one? Even though he had prayed, and it said prayed in his heart. See, that was a silent prayer. So we can pray aloud or we can pray in our mind, which are in our hearts. Okay, and that's how this was explained. Now, moving on, after we're going up now to chapter 24, and this is where he was on his journey to find, and which was guided by a spirit of God, the angel who led him to the well. And once that was sorted out, that yes, she was actually who the angel was guiding him to, and it was confirmed. You have to read it, chapter 24, chapter 25. And now it states that Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebecca, this young woman. Now, Rebecca, for a time, was barren. She could not bear children, so it states that Isaac would pray to God, imploring him to open her womb. And after 20 years, it clearly states that Isaac was 60 when she got pregnant and gave birth to Jacob and Esau, twins. Now, to mention that Jacob, the tribe of the 12 tribes, came from his line. And remember, all of this is stating that the seed from the Garden of Eden, when the promise was made that the seed would come to aid mankind, that was referring to Jesus, then Abraham, then through Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. Remember in the scriptures, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In New Testament, they talk about that. Okay, so now as time is passing here, I will mention that the birthright that Esau had, because Esau came out first, he was the firstborn. But in the scripture, it said that Esau was hungry, and Jacob made some stew, and he sold his birthright. He gave it up, okay, I'm starving, man, give me something to eat. He said, all right, if you give me your birthright. And yes, it's a difficult thing to understand, but it happened nonetheless, whether we understand it or not. So he gave up his birthright, and the Bible even says that God loved Jacob and hated Esau. For people who think that God does this a certain way, that you cannot determine who and what God is. He tells you who he is. The same way you don't like someone telling you about yourself. How dare you turn around and decide what God should and shouldn't do or be? Okay, so that Abraham blessed Jacob, which was the passing on the blessings was always done to the firstborn and mistakenly done to Jacob. Jacob is the one that wrestled with God, but that we will mention a little later. So this, we're about to wrap this up here, coming up on where Jacob meets Rachel, and through her, well, the 12 tribes are born. That is going to wrap it up for this short explanation of the scriptures. I'm Pastor Rich, Walking Ministries Online, and I will see you soon.